we are going to talk about this game's influence and connection to Doom Eternal, then we really need to compare it, and this game actually lacks in so many ways. There's possibilities here that don't just involve shooting a weak point for an easy kill. Get creative with it, like you did with the execution. There's only like maybe 2 enemies that force my hand slightly, and that's the Hattoris because they can deflect bullets, and the laser shoguns because the blast that you get is very limited in its utility. I mean, why can't I use this thing to push back enemy projectiles? Shadow Warrior 3 has seen a lot of praise from shooter and Doom Eternal fans, and why wouldn't it? It's been 2 years since Doom Eternal came out, and it redefined what fast-paced action shooters should look like by cranking up the insanity meter 3 times past the limit. It's a game that spawned countless discussions, from the fairness of its difficulty to the countless strategy and gun combo videos to debates around which weapon upgrades were worthwhile or not. But there really isn't much to talk about when it comes to Doom Eternal anymore. The DLCs came out, and the game honestly is done outside of master levels, and honestly I don't know if those are even being done anymore. The content well for the game is now dry, so if there was ever some time for there to be a competitor, or at very least a game inspired by it to come along, it's now. Now, as far as I'm concerned, Shadow Warriors 3 does do a good job at... Is it Shadow Warriors or Shadow Warrior? Yeah, it's just Shadow Warrior. Where it matters most, Shadow Warrior 3 does a good job at taking Doom Eternal's core gameplay ideas and making a fast-paced shooter that's fun in its own right. However, I have put around like 34 hours into this game at this point. If we're going to compare it to Doom Eternal, I have a lot to say. Because let's be honest, it's almost impossible to talk about this game without comparing it to Doom Eternal when it's so heavily influenced by it. For as much as this game gets right, it's also lacking in comparisons to its influence, in ways that surprises me hasn't been discussed by other Doom Eternal YouTubers. Maybe there's one that I haven't found, or maybe everyone's just kind of caught up in the honeymoon stage. I mean, most of those reviews came out before the game itself came out. And at the end of the day, it is cool just to have this game in and of itself. To have something that successfully emulates Doom Eternal's core gameplay. There's a vindication there knowing that other studios see what we love about that game so much that they're willing to try to provide more of it. The game is pretty short. I mean, I've beaten it about like 5, 6 times, maybe even 7. And I can confidently say that Shadow Warrior 3 is a good Doom Eternal substitute for the moment. But ultimately, I think this game will be forgotten as soon as another Doom Eternal clone comes along that is equally as good, if not slightly better. Or people just get bored and go back to playing Doom Eternal.
That dragon destroyed everything you ever built and decimated the citizens of Zilla City! The Zillions, Zilla! The Zillions are all gone!
So let's run through all the story and presentation stuff, because I feel like I wouldn't be doing my due diligence if I didn't cover it, but they're easily the least important aspects of this game, or at the very least of this review. Visuals are colorful, and the scenery is pleasing to look at. From running across the back of a giant dragon to jumping through caves, dashing through forests or ruins, there's a nice visual flair to everything in the game. The designs for the environments are pretty cool, and plenty of spots with either beautiful views or interesting things for you to look at in the sky. Enemy design is in the same vein, very colorful and cartoony, but most importantly easily recognizable, which in a game like this is very much needed. Sound design is good, the guns sound impactful as they should, the voice actors put in a good performance and are very entertaining, and they match the characters they represent. The soundtrack is just okay, it's fine, it fits the action, but none of it really stands out as amazing or instantly memorable. The story is simple, to the point, and doesn't take itself seriously. With no knowledge or reference to the past games, you are Lo Wayne, a man with severe brain damage, who failed to stop a giant dragon that's destroying the earth, and goes on a journey in hope of being able to stop it this time, but also get his mojo back. To that end, he teams up with an ex-rival known as Zilla, a cotton candy witch, Rocket Raccoon's cousin, and Wayne's best friend Hoji, the god of mischief who has been trapped in a mask. It's a very silly plot that's more of a parody of a redemption story than anything else. It's more concerned with making you laugh than getting you emotionally invested in the plight of Lil Wayne and his lost mojo. But how funny is it? It goes for the Borderlands approach to humor, where they just try to make a joke all the time, and it gets annoying. Listen, even if the jokes you were telling were all funny, this would still be annoying, because when you are just overloading me with punchlines one after the other, it just gets overwhelming. And just like Borderlands, this game hasn't learned the lesson that constantly throwing shit at a wall and seeing what sticks isn't a great process for coming up with good comedy. Granted, this is not as bad as Borderlands, because at least it's mostly contained to Lil Wayne, with the other characters playing things a lot more straight-faced. And the thing is, not all the humor here is bad. Visual gags like Lil Wayne trying to carry all his guns at once, or doing a puppet show with potatoes, or a censor bar when Lil Wayne's Lil Wayne is out. Or when the game focuses on character banter because, as I said, the rest of the characters are very serious, and this is played in contrast to Lil Wayne's less than professional personality. It's actually pretty funny stuff.
Are you wondering why I took your mask, Mr. Webb?
I am. I'm also wondering who does your hair. Just keep an eye on that stupid-ass egg.
You stupid idiot! Without that egg, we're never gonna defeat the dragon!
How is any of this my fault? And how can I be stupid and an idiot? You stupid idiot!
I took it because that mask is the only thing that can stave off our inevitable doom. And it was in the hands of a third-rate bargain basement ninja with a smart mouth and the emotional maturity of a third grader.
You sound just like my therapist.
Oh, Wang, the dragon's moving.
Hey, since we're on the same team again, maybe you should try cheering me on now and then.
Wang, can't be beat. He's the one who brings the heat. Hit him, pop their head. Blow him up and shoot him dead. Yay, Wang.
You know what? Forget it.
It's when the game dives headfirst in a lazy reference humor, or any time Lil Wayne is trying to purposely make a funny one-liner when the writing just becomes very bad.
Call me Edward Katana Hands. Ha! Does whatever a spider can. Hey, Trash Panda, since I'm pretty fast and you're pretty furry, maybe we should call ourselves the Fast and the Furious. Yippee-ki-yay, motherfuckers! Ah, it was just like dying.
Half of the comedy is like this, and if you are the type of person who doesn't like that style of humor, I say just skip cutscenes and turn down the dialogue. Before I can start critiquing it, I do gotta acknowledge what it gets right, which is really those fundamentals of Doom Eternal. Movement is fast-paced and fluid. You got a dash and a double jump like Doom Eternal. You also got a grappling hook to pull yourself to enemies. But you also got a slide that is probably one of the funnest slides in a game I have played. And I can't even explain why, it just feels good. You also got contextual parkour spots that can help you move around an arena. It's all good stuff, actually. There's open arena style maps with traps, and there's a decent variety within those maps. Like one where you got a square arena with two traps, a spiked roller on the floor, and a giant spiked maze trap that spins around in the air. Another one of my favorite arenas just involves a lot of platforms at different elevations with a trap in the middle that crushes enemies. Guns are powerful and upgradable with points you either find through the level or earn through completing challenges. And some of these upgrades are pretty cool, like having grenades home in on enemies after bouncing off a surface, or a basilisk shot that freezes nearby enemies, to the sword moves. And of course, we can't fail to mention the totally not Doom Eternal inspired auto shotgun. Like Doom Eternal, you are also encouraged to swap frequently to maximize damage, but also, that's how you circumvent the reloading. It's a cool system. It turns reloading into a slight punishment for not learning how to effectively switch weapons. To add on to that, gun swapping with the mouse wheel is actually pretty effective. If you scroll backwards, my combo essentially goes like this. I shoot SMGs until they're empty, switch to shotgun, pump 4 rounds into the enemy, switch to the revolver, empty the chamber, shuriken launcher then comes out and gets fired until I either kill something or encounter one of the few enemies it's not great against. Then I pull out the basilisk, pop a shot off, then grenade launcher, and then I go back to SMG to do it all again. And that's how you do the mouse wheel do-si-do, people. There's just a nice flow to how it's all set up, and if I really need to power through an enemy, I can use the mouse wheel going back and forth between the basilisk and the grenade launchers, so it's a pretty cool setup. Especially for somebody like me who didn't grow up with mouse and keyboard gaming, so I suck at switching weapons on the keyboard. I really do. It's literally my weak point in Doom Eternal. I cannot do it to save my life. Even with a custom setup, I am fucking awful at weapon switching. Killing enemies gets health back, and killing them with a sword gets ammo back. So, I mean, that system's self-explanatory. You can already see the parallel there. I don't need to explain it. You can use finishers that not only give health back, but give special weapons, which is one of the most unique mechanics this game has. Executions don't happen after doing a certain amount of damage, but instead you build up a meter that you can then spend to do them, which gives you a strategic use that I really like. They can be used either as an easy out from death or a means to deal death out more efficiently. You got ice bombs, laser bombs, vortex bombs, which I personally love because they remind me of the darkness. Giant hammers, which honestly suck. Giant drills, which honestly are mediocre. Spammable swords that make you fly through the air. Shoulder cannons. And my favorite, the fireworks gun, which allows you to spray and pray minus the pray because everything in your immediate vicinity dies. But as I said earlier in this view, I ultimately see this as a lesser game for many reasons, and a decent amount of them I have not seen talked about. At the end of the day, I just don't see this game being remembered or talked about in the same way as Doom Eternal, which on one hand isn't a bad thing. Not every game needs to be remembered as some like legendary, amazing experience to be considered good. Shadow Warrior 3 is providing fun for the moment, and that's all that really matters. So before I say anything else, Shadow Warrior 3 is fun, and you should play it if you like shooters, Doom Eternal, or like over-the-top wacky main protagonists and stories. But if we are going to talk about this game's influence and connection to Doom Eternal, then we really need to compare it, and this game actually lacks in so many ways. So let's start off with the fact that this game has less content, no hub chill area, no collectibles, and no New Game Plus. Now, truth be told, those are the least important exclusions from this game. Having more content doesn't matter as much as having quality content, that of which Shadow Warrior 3 does have. The Slayer Hub, though cool and fun to explore, once you've seen it all and all it has to offer, it just ended up being a buffer area between the actual gameplay that honestly became a little tedious. So it could be argued that not having that and going from one segment to the next, from start to finish, is a good thing and allows the game to keep a faster pace. To that end, if there's no hub to appreciate collectibles, then there's no point to collectibles. The lack of New Game Plus did irk me at first, but the game is so short and there's not a huge amount of unlocks, and it don't take long to get all the weapons again, so it's not a huge deal. I prefer there was a New Game Plus, but it's not a significant enough problem. I only bring these things up because they were things that existed in Doom Eternal that did give extra value to that game that aren't here. But onto the important things that it lacks. This game is a lot less difficult, which, I mean, doesn't bother me. I can't even beat Doom Eternal on Nightmare. I suck, so it does. So for me, it's kind of a good thing, but again, it's something that existed in Doom Eternal that lacks here. And for players who love the, like, ball-crushingly hard challenge of that game, you're not going to find it in Shadow Warrior 3. Now, I have seen other reviewers bring up the lack of challenge, but usually they just suggest another difficulty mode, and I don't think that's necessarily a great idea, because I don't think this game's lack of challenge comes from there not being a harder difficulty mode. I think it comes from some of the fundamental designs of the gameplay itself. For starters, there's not enough enemies that force you to change up your playstyle. This, to me, was one of the most crucial things about Doom Eternal's difficulty, no matter what difficulty you were actually playing on. Things could be going fine until, like, an Archvile shows up, and now you have to scramble to kill him before he floods the field with enemies, or incinerates you with fire, or a carcass that will place shields that protect enemies and limit your movement, or the Pinky that bum rushes you and forces you to retreat or get behind it for a quick kill. Or God forbid the Marauder, who is specifically designed to counter every tactic you have formed for the other demons. Shadow Warrior 3 has nothing like this. You can use the same tactic for just about every enemy in this game. It don't make a difference. There's only like maybe 2 enemies that force my hand slightly, and that's the Hattoris because they can deflect bullets, and the Laser Shoguns because you have to reveal a weak spot in order to kill them. But the way around those problems aren't very hard. Like with the Hattori, you just shoot them with the Basilisk grenade combo until it's dead. Because the Basilisk breaks his guard, and then the grenade does good damage. And with the Laser Shogun, you have a Ki Blast on a short cooldown that can be made even shorter, that can be used to easily reveal its backside. Or you can just use an execution for any of these enemies and then get more free kills from taking their weapons. For everything else, as long as you are weapon switching and keeping up pressure, it doesn't matter what gun you use or how you approach enemy encounters. As long as you're staying mobile and shooting, you'll win most of the time. And then you have the lack of variety in weapon upgrades that is limited even more by the fact that half of them just aren't that good. The shotgun and the Basilisk are probably the only ones that I think have any actual use. I mean, the grenade one's okay, the pistol and SMG upgrades just add elemental effects which are cool but have very little utility. The sword upgrades, though cool on paper, are just way too clumsy to effectively use. I mean, first you gotta slash with the sword, then click and hold the button again to activate the attack, and then the way you choose the different sword attacks involves you holding one of the different directional buttons as you hold the button. Forward is fire, backwards is ice, and sideways either direction is thunder. More than half the time I tried to use this, it just resulted in me taking damage, so I just ended up not using it ever again in repeat playthroughs. It's the same with the skill trees. The only good ones are the ones that give you better orb drop rates or increase the effects of explosives. I guess the health ones are okay, but like you don't need them if you even get decently good at this game. This game also lacks any precision shot system, which I think is a crucial one because the precision shots were part of why Doom Eternal had such a high skill ceiling. Overpowering the enemy was one thing, and it was fun, but smart, precise, skilled play was heavily rewarded too. And that's just missing from Shadow Warrior 3. There's no weak spots that disable or help deal out extra damage except for the Laser Shogun, where you specifically have to target a weak spot just to damage it. And without it, there's nothing stopping me from just unloading my clip into every enemy and then just switching without any thought whatsoever. At least when I see an enemy with a precision weak point, I now am faced with a choice. I can either pull out a weapon that's suited for getting that shot, or I can choose just not to bother with that in the first place. But here, killing enemies just comes down to damage output and nothing else. Like imagine if, for example, the Kugutsu could be exploded as an ice bomb with a precise headshot from the pistol or either the Basilisk. Now you have a reason to switch to those weapons when you see that enemy as opposed to just using anything you want. What if there was a lever on the Slinky Jackies that you could shoot that doesn't kill them but incapacitates them for a bit, or makes them malfunction so that they can't play saws on the field? What if there was a weak spot on the Magaras that was only visible when they were in the air, and if you shot it, it would make them fall to the ground and remain exposed for a bit so you could have an opportunity to deal damage? There's possibilities here that don't just involve shooting a weak point for an easy kill. Get creative with it, like you did with the executions. The Ki Blast that you get is very limited in its utility. I mean, why can't I use this thing to push back enemy projectiles? Instead, all it's good for is pushing small enemies into spikes, revealing the Laser Shogun's weak point, and interrupting the Hattori spin attack, which I do like that you can do that, but I would have liked to see more stuff like that in the game. And see, here's the thing. When I really start comparing this game to Doom Eternal, those are the things that are missing. That opportunity to get better, or just to refine a playstyle, or even create your own playstyle, because Doom Eternal has more freedom in making a playstyle of your own by giving you multiple weapon mods, which have spawned conversations within the fandom about which ones are the best or not, as well as all other discussions involving strategies in the game. There's a reason why there was a steady flow of content surrounding Doom Eternal for almost 2 years, and why less than a month after its launch, no one is discussing strategies or weapon combos or upgrades or anything for Shadow Warrior 3. That's because outside of talking about how generally fun and fast-paced it is, there really isn't much to discuss. There's just not really any mechanic worth picking apart or examining, because this game doesn't have mechanics deep enough to be worth doing that. That doesn't make it a bad game, but again, we really, if we're really going to compare this game to Doom Eternal, then we need to recognize that outside of just general content, there are so many gameplay elements just missing from this game that make it a much lesser and less challenging game than Doom Eternal. Also, I'm a little sad that there's no Doom Eternal reference trophy when it comes to killing the rabbits. This game is littered with rabbits, and you can just murder them, which I did my first playthrough.
Never listen to what I wanted or what I need.
One last thing I would like to say before closing out this review, though, and that's an acknowledgement that this game is very different from its predecessors. It's very different from Shadow Warrior 2 and even Shadow Warrior 1. And when we're comparing it to Doom Eternal, there needs to be as well an acknowledgement that Doom Eternal had Doom 2016 to kind of work off of and to improve upon, get to the gameplay formula that we love. So my hope is that Shadow Warrior 4 will continue with this gameplay direction and make those improvements that I mentioned. Because if it does, it'll be a truly fantastic game, and one that's truly able to compete with Doom Eternal. But it is important to remember that Shadow Warrior 3 is a fun game in its own right. It's just not as good as Doom Eternal. Anyways, that's all I got to say. I'm Digital Shinigami. If you like this video, make sure to comment, like, subscribe, all the good stuff that helps a channel like this grow and thrive. I could really use it. I would really appreciate it. I'm gonna go play in traffic now. I'll see you all later.